Let's talk about whether it actually makes sense for you to buy a home or whether it's smarter to keep renting. I've been listening to a podcaster guy named Ramit Sethi. He has a book on I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and he has not ever bought a home, I don't think. He's been renting for like 10 or 15 years. And the reason that he does that is because it keeps his monthly costs low. And then all that money that he would have been putting into his mortgage, he puts into his investments and he saves that money in like the S&P 500 or something like that. So that is one strategy and it makes a lot of sense, especially if you do put that differential all completely into savings and investments and that the investments do well. But a lot of people do not do that. A lot of the reasons that people are renting is because they don't have the money to, save and put into a house of their own. A house and home ownership is really a huge part of the American dream. And if you can afford it, I think it turns out numbers wise to be a very good investment. So let's take a look at how this plays out in the Seattle area. So here in Seattle, mortgages are very expensive compared to rents. If I were to buy a house and rent it out to a tenant, the tenant would probably have a cheaper rent payment than I would have for my mortgage. So I'd be losing money every month. And that's essentially the situation that you're putting yourself in when you buy a house and you live there. It's kind of like you're renting it out to yourself. But why do people do this? Why are people, crawling over each other hand and fist to do this? Why has the real estate market in Seattle continued to be so strong, even in the case of all the different things that we've been through lately, right? So what we have found in different housing markets across the country is that there are kind of flat markets and appreciation based markets. And so flat markets might be something like you would find in Indiana or Ohio or the Midwest, where you could still buy a house for $100,000 and it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot house, right? If you bought that a long time ago, maybe it was worth 1,000, but those ones tend to be less expensive and they just don't appreciate. So here on the West Coast, what we have found is that we have a lot more opportunity for housing prices to go up. Now, they don't always go up, sometimes they go down. And if you look at charts from like California, they go up and down like a roller coaster. I've lived in Seattle pretty much all my life. I lived next to my parents. We're rooted in this area. And I would say that for the most part, the market has gone up pretty consistently, minus the 2008 period when, the whole nation basically crashed its real estate market collectively. And a couple other times before that, maybe Boeing was doing poorly or some other things. But over time, if you are owning property, it does tend to go up, especially in this area. And I would say, first and foremost, do not buy any property that you can't afford and don't plan to live in for at least 5 years, because that's the period of time that I would say is a minimum safe guesstimate based on the data that you can pretty safely count on having built up enough equity to be able to sell the home if you need to, like if you change jobs or something like that. Before that, I have people that owned the house for 1 year and sold it at a profit and, were able to pay off their car and do other stuff. But that's the exception rather than the rule. I don't want you to take these last couple of years as an indication of how the market usually is. So think safety, think conservative, and plan on holding your real estate longer, like 5 years or more is a good starting place. Now, a lot of people are thinking, oh, I have to save up for the down payment. And as they save up for the down payment, they see housing values running away from them. The values sometimes go up so quickly that you can't save fast enough to actually gain on your goal of, 10% down. What used to be $60,000, now it's going to be $70,000 that I have to save, and I can't save fast enough. The market's going up more than 100,000 a year, and I can't save 10,000 a year, something like that. So that's another challenge. And for people who find themselves stuck in that situation where they're saving and the market is running away from them, I want to share two things. One is that you can get into property with a smaller down payment, 3%, 5%, 10%. You don't need 20%, but it's great if you have it. And I have had clients get in with 0% as well. There are Washington State first-time home buyers. So if you look at mortgage calculators and you think you can afford the monthly payment, but you don't have the money for the big down payment, then that might be something to look into and talk about with your mortgage broker. So the next thing is credit, right? You have to have pretty good credit, but your credit doesn't actually determine how much they're going to lend you. Your income determines how much they're going to lend you. They want to see that you have enough income to make that mortgage payment each and every month. If you use a mortgage calculator, you can kind of get an idea for what those monthly payments look like. The bank ideally would like you to have no more than about 1/3 of your income going to your mortgage payment. In some cases, that might be up to 40% of your income going to the mortgage payment, but it's really your income level that's going to determine how much of a loan they give you. And then your credit score and your debt will determine whether they even choose to give you the loan or not, kind of what your risk profile is, and maybe what interest rates or other costs you pay, because bad credit is riskier. They might charge you a little bit more in points or interest rate in order to compensate for that higher risk that those credit score numbers represent. Now, assuming that you can afford it, whether you want to rent is a big question, or rent versus buy, right? So when you rent, you probably have a lower payment now, but 30 years from now, your payment will probably be higher than the mortgage on your property. So although it can be painful at first, due to inflation, we all know about inflation now, it's cranking up, right? So prices of things tend to go up over time. So your rent is likely to go up over time. If you've been a tenant for any period, you probably have experienced that. Lots of people in Seattle have told me, like, hey, my landlord just increased my rent by $400 a month or some huge amount. It's very jarring. People don't like that. So having this ability to control and have that mortgage be a locked in fixed cost that's as painful now at the beginning as it's ever going to be as we experience inflation. Your income goes up over time. That payment will not go up over time. You'll be protected with a fixed payment if you get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and it will become a more and more affordable portion of your income as your income goes up in the future. Can't say the same thing about rents. Another thing is just that stability, right? Is security of knowing that your landlord's not going to come in and say, "Hey, I'm selling the house." This is happening with a client of mine right now. He's selling the house, and it's very unfortunate timing for his tenant, whose husband is in the hospital in ICU, having all sorts of heart problems and likely to die soon. I mean, what terrible bad luck and terrible bad timing for this whole situation. And it's because as a tenant, she doesn't have control over what's happening. She's on a month-to-month lease. She's at the whim of the boss, the landlord. And if he says you're out, then she's got to scramble and find something else. And maybe she can't find anything else in this neighborhood, in this price range, etc. So it can create a lot of risk of upheaval going forward. But I will say, if you look at the statistics, home ownership has proven to be a powerful wealth building tool for a lot of people. The average household net worth, this is a nationwide statistic, for people who are homeowners, their average net worth is above $250,000. For people who are renters, their average net worth is about $6,000. So that represents a difference of over 200,000, almost 250,000, a quarter million. Is the average difference between a renter and a homeowner. And some of that might be because people who own homes make more money, and there could be a number of other extenuating circumstances. But overall, it's important to, if you want to become wealthy, to kind of see what wealthy people do. One of the things is that they lock in their housing payment, they buy in an appreciating area, and they're patient as they wait for those home values to go up. And last, I'll just point out that we are still in a very high inflationary environment, right? We all hear about it in the news all the time. So when inflation is high, it's kind of like appreciation on steroids. I differentiate them in that appreciation is when, the home value is going up more than the baseline of other things. But essentially, they act the same way in that your monthly payment is locked in, and that value is becoming less and less, right? Like, imagine in the hyperinflation period post World War I Germany, when people were going around with wheelbarrows of cash, right? Well, maybe that was $1,000 in the wheelbarrow, and it was enough to buy a loaf of bread at the grocery store. But if their mortgage was only $2,000, now they're paying their mortgage with essentially 2 loaves of bread worth of money. Whereas the house itself, the hard goods, the loaf of bread, the house, the car, the vehicles, the food, those were the things that were valuable. So you own and control the house, the hard good that's valuable, and you're paying your mortgage with loaves of bread, essentially, right? Just a couple. So it's an interesting extreme example of what happens. But as if you know any little old ladies that have owned their house for 50 years, they've paid it off, it's worth $1 million. Maybe their mortgage payment was, originally $87 a month or something like that. And I know, my parents bought their place for 40,000 back in the day, and now it's worth over $1 million, like same kind of thing, right? So that's what you can look forward to, and that's what you can expect if you decide to take the long-term approach to owning an asset like real estate, whether it's for you to live in or as an investment property. Obviously, I believe in it. I own several investment properties as well as my own personal home, and I think home ownership is a great foot in the door, a great way to start off that investment and wealth building journey, whether you're young and you're just buying your first house, or maybe you're like the grandma that I sold that zero money down $400,000 townhouse to. She's thrilled. She's a homeowner. She's building equity, and she's still enjoying her life. So thank you so much for watching. I hope if you have any questions about the pros and cons of renting versus owning, that I can help answer them for you. So just let me know, and I'll talk to you on the next video.